if we used to go one-on-one and then add 66 and 2/3%, I got 141 and 2/3 chance of winning at sacrifice. See, Joe, the numbers don't lie.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and first time in a long time, Perch has been out of the scene as far as comic book news here on the channel, but we've got some important stuff that came out, and just in time, Perch returned. How you doing, Perch?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you again. Glad to be back.
Well, nobody's happier for you to be back than me. I appreciate. You have no idea how much deeper my appreciation is for you than after these last few weeks without you.
Love makes art grow fonder. What can we say? So our bromance has returned.
Absolutely, and it's hotter than ever.
Oh.
So while you were away, I imagine you've seen this, maybe even talked about it on your channel. Diamond finally released their first numbers since March 2020 as far as sales data. And there's a lot of very interesting things in here. There's also some other information they put out, but it's kind of looking pretty darn good. This appears to be like one of the highest sales months in the comic industry, in like the last 20 years.
It's an interesting bit of numbers, and I think there's stuff to read. You do have to spend some time with it. First of all, the numbers, there is some inaccuracy with the numbers, I think, even though they're putting them out. And I say that from the standpoint of, if you look closely at them, there's still some estimates going on that Diamond is doing, and I don't quite understand why that is, but they're not outrageous. So let's say, just for argument's sake, that they're 10% off with everything too high. It would still be a really good month, even if that was true. And I don't think it's anywhere close to that much of an overage. But yeah, it's an interesting bit of numbers. It kind of, and keep in mind, and your viewers should realize that this month is typically higher in years. The industry tends to rise during this month every year. And so we are looking at a higher month for the year, most likely. But yeah, you can't look at this and go, "Oh, this is terrible news." What's interesting is it's not quite as good a news as I think. There are people, I saw creators talking about how there were 20 comics were selling over 100,000 and other things. That's clearly not the case. And you see it from this chart, but higher numbers. It's that you can't get too negative about that.
Absolutely. It looks like total sales are at about 40 million for new comic sales in June 2021. In comparison, I think it was at about, at 28 or 26 million for June 2019. Last time we had a full June number slate. So it's significantly higher. There's a few caveats that we'll get into, but that's very good. Yeah. The Diamond numbers themselves are 30, which still would have beat the entire, June 2019 sales numbers.
That's right. And keep in mind, like I said, the estimates for DC are still off. No doubt about it. It's because we don't have those as part of Diamond. But numbers are higher. The interesting picture this paints is something that I know you and I have been saying for a while, and it's been, for whatever reason, a struggle for people to get it, is that the industry was having a bit of a slump in 2018, 2019. The message was coming out from a number of people within the industry was that, no, things had rebounded. It was going great. 2016, 17 were the bad years, but 18 and 19 were not good years. Like if you go further back, if you go to 14, 12, 10, you see stronger health in the industry. The 18 and 19 had this people, for whatever reason, well, we know the reason, but they were pushing this narrative that it was doing really, really great. And I think in light of seeing this, it helps paint a picture that maybe not.
Well, and we're looking at pure dollar numbers. If we go to units, obviously the picture changes because there have been dramatic rises in prices. Specifically at DC, a lot of very high-priced comic books. Marvel is catching up. We know in a few months, number ones are going to be $6 for the main titles. Yeah, absolutely and nuts.
People can't you can't underestimate that because some of the titles like Venom, it's a more expensive issue. A lot of the items that are on this list that are near the top cost more. And when they cost more, dollar numbers go up. So, you can make the argument, by the way, with that, to be fair, hey, the comic cost more, so the shop is making more and the publisher is making more. And that's true. If they raise the price on it, then, they're making more money. The problem with that is just, you as a customer are spending more money. So are you going to keep spending that money? So that's the balance.
So let's get into some of the interesting things that we see here. Mm-hmm. Now, first off, they say the top 300 comics for June went for nearly $1,400 more than they did in June 2019. That's a significant number. And, further isolating that DC Comics is selling the same amount, but Marvel is selling significantly less. But one of the things that they've changed, and they did change the way that they're accounting these numbers, is they are now collecting all the SKUs that have different prices into one order, right?
Yes.
So the top 300 now includes more comics than it has in the past.
Yes. And that's a big deal. And that if you retroactively would go back into previous years, you would see a rise. So this, if you look at this chart and you go, wow, things are really doing great. It does look like things have risen, but the fact that they are doing this grouping means that the things are rising because of that mechanism. And if you went back and did that historically, you would see a similar rise. So we wouldn't see such a dramatic increase if you were comparing apples to apples.
The other thing we have to keep into, there's three things that I want to take into account and then do a little bit more analysis. But the second thing we need to take into account, there were 5 shipping weeks for both DC and Marvel in June. So there's an extra week.
Yes, always helps the numbers for sure.
Yes, especially during the summer. Mm-hmm. This is peak comic sale season.
Yes.
And the conventions have just kind of started to open up and everything. So that's another thing you have to keep in mind. So there were more comic selling weeks than there normally would be, even though Marvel distributed less comics than normal.
Yes.
But there were some high profile comics that came out. The other thing that they've changed as far as their accounting, Diamond is no longer has the returnability penalty. If a comic book was returnable, they would automatically take 10% off of the total number of comic books ordered. They would cut it by 10% because it was returnable to account for the number of comics that would return. So the amount of comics that were returnable, there's no longer a penalty.
That's right. And that, I threw out that number 10% earlier, kind of anecdotally, but yes, that is a factor here. So people listening to this, you should be listening to it of like, oh, they're finding all the bad news and all this. No, these are just the facts of how the numbers are calculated. Things still have increased, and that's good news. But before you go running off saying it's the best month in the history of comics, you really ought to take these things into account because it does change the picture quite a bit.
Yes, they're accounting differently for the numbers. Right. We have to look at that. So expect things to return more to normal, but still be probably pretty good in July.
Yeah. No, I would expect July to be solid. I mean, August is typically a little higher as well, but this August doesn't look as strong in terms of the content being put out. They don't have the same kind of big titles that would bounce that number up. I think, by the way, for what it's worth, I think the way they're accounting now in terms of grouping the SKUs and in terms of how they're handling the returnability, I actually think this is more accurate, if that makes any sense. I actually think this is a better way to account for the numbers. I think it's giving us a more honest view of what's going on than maybe what we've gotten in the past. So I think it's a good thing. I think I've seen some people say, oh, they're deliberately, playing tricks in order to make the numbers go up. Actually, this is probably more accurate. What we saw before was worse.
Mm-hmm. But it's not a direct comparison,
no,
which we've
not.
kind of done here. And another thing that I'm seeing, and I'm not sure about you, Perch, I think we've talked about it a few times. I'm seeing a lot of variant covers. And it feels like, in my estimation, that the publishers, DC has gotten in on it. Marvel still leads the game, but we're seeing Boom, Dynamite, Image, even IDW are really getting in this. They are placating and they are marketing and they are looking for the speculator market, and they're putting out a lot of variant covers, not even on number ones. They're just putting out a lot of variant covers, period.
They are. And I did a quick little analysis of just looking at this chart and checking off the titles that had variants. And what you see is everything in the top 50 has a variant. They all do. And that's, again, you can have different opinions on that. My opinion has been and always is that that's unhealthy. Collectors like variants and good for them. As a customer, it's not unhealthy for you. If you want to buy it, great, it's your deal. But I think companies that get more and more reliant on that, to me, it just smells exactly like the collector bust that happened in the 90s is about to happen all over again, because it's not that they're making these variants as a way to say thank you to customers. They're making these variants and they are relying on them financially. Increasingly, it's a core part of the business model. It definitely is for Marvel. It is for some of these other companies as well.
It's making up for sales that they've lost in other areas.
That's right.
To move the numbers back up.
Yeah, and I think that combined with constant number ones and relaunches. I mean, I just did a number analysis for this week, the comics coming out this week, and more than a third of all the comics are number one issues that are sold this week. A third, which is absurd. There were 4 comics that were numbered after 50. And so I think the combination of this restart, number one, and variants, this isn't healthy for the industry. And I think there is going to be a price to be paid at some point.
So you did mention in the top 10 comics, we'll kind of look at these and we'll kind of suss this out as well.
Yeah.
There are 6 comics that shipped over 100,000, 2 that shipped over 200,000. Spawn Universe number 1, Venom 35. Both special issues. Spawn Universe was $6, Venom was $10. That is a very hefty number. It ended up being 280,000 total.
Yeah. When you're shipping no, absolutely. When you're shipping that volume at that price, no shock that the numbers go up.
Absolutely. And if we look at the top 10, there are 2 comics total that you wouldn't consider to be special. Batman 109, which probably did include the debut of a character. It seems like every Batman issue has a new character debuting. And then Star Wars High Republic number 6, which came in at number 10 at about 85,000 issues. Otherwise, we got Venom 35, which is the end of Donny Cates' run, and also Venom, I believe, 200. Spawn Universe number 1, which is the debut of a couple of key characters that are going to be launching into their own titles. Berserker number 3, obviously that's associated with Keanu Reeves and a special project. Star Wars War of Bounty Hunters number 1, the kickoff of that event. We've got Demon Days Mariko number 1, Nice House on the Lake number 1, X-Men 21 associated with Hellfire Gala, Planet Size X-Men number 1 also associated with Hellfire Gala.
Yeah.
I'm not saying these are bad numbers, but if you look at the top 10, it's gimmicked.
Sure. Yeah, no, very much. And it's gimmick. It's tied to something else. There's heavy incentive programs around that, including the Star Wars High Republic comic had big incentive programs for number 6. So this is going to spike numbers up when there's some minimum commitments for that title. And again, these are all mechanisms. If you're a publisher, you do want to use every trick and tool you can to boost your numbers up. That's what their job is. It's what they should be doing. However, you have to balance that against a sound business strategy that's going to survive over time. And if you start looking at your numbers like this and you see everything is a variant, incentive, gimmick issue on some level, then at least somewhere in the back of your mind, you have to be thinking, what happens when I run out of gimmicks? Do I have a stable base to keep going? At least I would hope people are thinking that.
All right, so I'm going to back up my idea that we are potentially creating a new bubble, not nearly as big as the 90s bubble with the speculator market. Diamond came out and they announced that the number of new orders, like new order accounts that were ordering comic books, has grown 20% in 2021 compared to the averages of the previous 3 years. We know that one of the things that happened in the bubble during the 90s was there were a lot of new comic shops that were kind of filling in once they saw how hot a lot of the speculator market was. Do you think that plays into this as well?
Well, it's funny you mention that, because I think that of all the parts of this, I think that's the most misleading number of all. And I noticed that the guys from Comic-Con also pointed that out. It's 20% new accounts. It's not 20% new stores, and it's definitely not new stores. And what gets counted in that 20% of new accounts is transfer of ownership. It's renewal of accounts. If you are having to update your account, and Diamond updated many after the pandemic, several stores either changed or altered their status during the shutdown and everything else. And they also sell other things. So if you're somebody who's signing up to Diamond to get things other than comics, like shirts or toys or merchandise, you're getting an account. And so it's one of those pieces where it's worded in a very kind of careful way. I don't believe there's 20% new shops at all. In fact, quite the opposite. We've heard that there's been a contraction of actual shops. There are more places selling Diamond material, which in some cases is comics, in some cases is other merchandise in other locations. And Diamond did do a big outreach, especially after DC left, to try and get other people to sign up for accounts. The number we're not getting are people ordering from those accounts? How big are those accounts, and what are they buying? So it's it's good news for Diamond to get accounts. Sure. It will be better news if those accounts are all buying things, which we don't know how much money those are transferring. But I noticed a couple people, I think Tim Seeley, I saw him say, this is 20% more places selling comics. Actually, no, that's not what this is saying at all. It's simply saying 20%. Diamond saw 20% new accounts. They didn't give you the number of how many accounts closed or retracted.
And they did kind of cage that when they said that this is reflecting the strength and resilience, this is being Diamond, of the comic and collectible industry as it continues to recover from COVID-19. It's not only talking about comic books, it's also talking about collectibles.
It is. And so it's again, not trying to find just anything to be negative about, but that is a misleading sentence from Diamond. And as I mentioned, the guys from Comic-Con also picked up on that, and I've seen some wild misinterpretations of that number. And it goes back to, if you're a news site, for example, do your homework. Actually, if you want to say that there's new comic shops, do the work to figure out if there's actually new comic shops. This one bit of data is not saying that.
Yeah, this is what Jeppy Family Enterprises Chief Sales and Services Officer Chris Powell had to say. It is encouraging to see this influx of new customers entering the industry. Many retailers told us over the last year plus that their sales were buoyed by creatively reaching consumers who discovered or rediscovered what comics and collectibles had to offer. This growth has clearly enabled entrepreneurs to open new shops or add comics to existing stores. We look forward to helping our customers, new and long time, make the most of the industry growth in the months and years to come.
Yeah, and all that said, I mean, look, the industry is not imploding or collapsing. Clearly, there are numbers here. Any person who's running around cheering is a fool. That everything is solved. Everything is definitely not solved. There's still plenty of problems. And I think if you're a creator, for example, who just heard from Marvel or DC that they're cutting your rate, as many creators have, you shouldn't say, well, but at least the industry is as strong as it's ever been. I mean, come on, you can't have both things true simultaneously. But yeah, comics are being sold, people are picking things up, and there's been this strength at the top that is encouraging. I think that's great. The only really bad news I've seen out of all this is I had heard, and I haven't seen the final numbers myself from Marvel's side, that the Hellfire Gala was didn't blow the doors down, but did do better than people were expecting. And to me, that's bad news, because I'm not looking forward to Hellfire Gala 2022. But
nor have I. So those are the numbers. We've added a little bit of perspective to what you're reading there. Is it good news? Absolutely. Those numbers are very strong. But there are some things you need to keep in consideration when you're looking at them. And we'll see what happens in July and see if it's maintainable. I would say it's not, just based on the fact that there's not going to be 5 weeks.
Yeah, no, July will definitely be smaller. I mean, and this is common sense. When you have an extra week to sell comics, your numbers are going to be higher. You sold 1/5, more comics. So yeah, it's going to be bigger. And July will be smaller. July also doesn't have the same level of issues. Venom was clearly red hot in it ending and everything coming to a close there. It won't be as strong. But the comic industry as a whole, it's chugging along. It's not falling apart. If you believe that it was going to all end in July, it's clearly not. But it's a balance, like everything.
I want to say thank you very much to Perch for joining me on the channel. Glad to have you back, and hopefully we'll be talking to you on Saturday. If not, we'll get you on the Comics Aficionados another week.
Glad to be back. Thanks.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.